we've designed it in a way that we feel that I think fits the future land use. And it will be, there'll be a section off into 6 or 12 individual units that will be resold as condo units.
Okay. Are you in agreement with staff recommendation?
Yes, I am in agreement with all the recommendations.
You are muted.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
You are unmuted.
Jackie?
Yes, I was curious, what was the reason that East Village didn't receive the notice?
We sent them mail. They didn't attend the meeting. We did have, I will say, we did have we had to change the meeting because of the COVID-19. We were originally intended on going to the public library. We had to change that meeting, so I'm not sure if they were aware of that change. We actually went down and posted notices on all of the doors a day or two before the meeting because we had to change it last minute. I don't think we let Historic East Village know of that because it was the last minute. I did reach out to them on Monday or Tuesday and haven't received a call back, to my knowledge. So I haven't been able to get in touch with them.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant for item number 5?
There's a Carter R that's asking to be unmuted to speak. I don't know if they should raise their hand or not.
Yeah, the chair will open it up for public comment, and then we'll do that.
Okay, is there anyone else online who would like to speak in favor of the applicant for item number 5?
I have unmuted Carter.
Okay. Does he want to speak at this point?
I show Carter R as being muted. Dolores, did you say you unmuted him?
I've unmuted him again.
Okay. Carter, if you could state your first and last name and your address, please, for the record.
Carter R is actually for Thomas Ellis. The address is 712 East Railroad Avenue. I don't have anything at this time. I just wanted that to be an option.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anyone on the line would like to speak in opposition of this proposal? For number 5, we're on item number 5. Does anyone want to speak in opposition for item number 5? Raise your hand.
Yes. Again, if you are on Zoom, please use the raise hand function under the participants at the bottom, or hit *9 on your phone if you're calling in.
Okay. I do see Carter.
Are you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Thomas Ellis at 712 East Railroad. I am opposed to using the alley as driveways.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit? I mean, you're opposed because...
Well, I've got a small child. There's other children in the neighborhood, and they're used to playing in that alley and riding the bikes around the house, and I don't feel it'd be very safe if there was 12 families driving their cars in and out of that driveway.
There's more pedestrians that use that side of it versus the street side.
Okay, question?
Please give your name and address for the record, the second person that spoke.
You're muted. If you could unmute Carter R., that was the second person that spoke.
It looks like we have them unmuted. So for the record, we need both speakers' information.
Sure. This is Jody Ellis. And earlier you had stated that you would like to see the alley being used because you were afraid of pedestrians and others being harmed by vehicles coming out of the street access versus the alley access. And the truth to that is that the side isn't used very much at all. You would be affecting more by using the alleyway.
Okay, question for Ms. Ellis? Okay, none. Is there anyone else on the line who would like to speak in opposition of this proposal or express concerns?
Item 5.
Okay. Item 5, yes, sorry. I'm seeing Larry's iPad. Unmute. Larry?
No.
Larry?
Yes.
Yeah. Your name and address, please?
806 East Railroad Avenue, Larry Parsons.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to, I was speaking, I oppose the project also. I'd rather see, single family homes, the amount of extra traffic, like they said, there's going to be, potentially 2 cars minimum per townhome, and that's 12 units. That's 24 cars. It's going to raise property taxes. It's just, I don't know, this is a single family dwelling area, and just like to see it stay that way.
Okay. Question for Mr. Parsons? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Anyone else want to speak in opposition or express concerns to item number 5? Okay, Vicki Stark.
Yes, my name is David Johnson, 700 East Railroad.
Okay.
I want to second what has already been said in opposition in regards to excessive traffic in and around the alleyway area. We're concerned for the safety of the children in the neighborhood as well as just excessive traffic and noise.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Johnson? Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to speak or express concerns for item number 5? Yes?
Vicki Stark, 700 East Railroad. I'd like to point out that the alley has been vacant. It's been unmaintained and unused for years. And this would drastically change the character of the neighborhood by suddenly putting 12 driveways onto this alley, which has been unmaintained except by the neighbors, and potentially 2 cars per 12 houses going in and out of this alleyway. We're really opposed to the idea of using the alleyway as entrances.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Stark? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Anyone else want to speak in opposition or express concerns for item number 5? Okay, not seeing any. It's time to close the public hearing. for item number 5? Commissioners, time for discussion. What are your thoughts on that?
I believe Glenna, our legal staff, has raised her hand.
The applicant should get a rebuttal.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, Eric. That's good. The applicant, you want to come back on for item number 5?
Michael here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, and the main concern that I heard has to do with the alley. So, are there options, or how do you feel about that? What do you?
Yes. The alley access doesn't make a big deal to me, other than I think there is a little bit better resale long term with the alley, with the garages not facing the street. I think it has a better appearance from the street, but I do understand the neighbors' concerns, so I'm sure there's a way that we can design it with the garages in the front. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me whether it's a roadside or street side entrance or alleyway entrance.
Okay, questions for the applicant on item number 5? I mean, this is Jan. I actually had a question for staff. I mean, is there flexibility here, or are there options?
Chair, this is Michael Ludwig, Planning Administrator for the city. It's very clear that our zoning code would want the driveways or the garages on the back of the building. I do think there are probably options on this site. Tonight, it's just a rezoning of the property. They would still need to submit a site plan, and I do believe that there's opportunity to potentially have a drive on the subject property, not on the alley right-of-way, that would serve driveways on the back sides of the building as well. I think those are all things that could potentially be addressed during the site plan review stage of development. It is a fairly deep parcel. I think there's an opportunity to have the units fronting up close to Vale Street and still either use the alley or a private drive on the subject property to access the garages. Thank you.
Mike, it's Will here. I have a question about number 2. It says that any development that utilizes the adjoining alley shall improve the alley to the satisfaction of the city engineer. What is your thinking along that line? Are you thinking that that's hard surface or what?
Yes, it would need to be a hard surface drive. So again, it could either be the alley right of way or a private drive on the private property.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Greg Wattier, board member. So discussion within the board. I think really Mike nailed it on the head. I think really the topic tonight is about density. I forgot the exact number, but I think the applicant was showing 12 units maybe if they did both buildings. So I think that's really the question is row house development on Vale and as opposed to vehicular in and out. I understand that's a big concern for the folks in the neighborhood. But we do have several of these neighborhoods that have what I'd call semi-used alley spaces around town, but it's really about the density and whether or not we feel medium density, which makes sense in this neighborhood.
Thanks, Greg. And it is nice to hear from Mike that, the alleyway, we can negotiate for the next phase after this. So, other comments, questions? I mean, what does the commission to do?
This is Greg Wattier again. I'm not quite ready to make a motion, but I would throw out there that I think I would support medium density. I think it makes sense with the overall plan. I think it makes sense being adjacent to the river and adjacent to 6, or near 6, sorry. You know, the architecture and the site planning, I think we can dig into deeper when it comes back through. And I also appreciate the idea of row houses along Vale as opposed to row houses along, say, 7th and the other direction of the streets. I think this concept makes sense going in the orientation it is.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Someone want to make a motion?
This is Greg again. I'd offer to move staff.
If I can interject, Chair, if Greg wants to leave the discussion for the alley for a later date, I'd ask that he modify the staff condition number 1. You could just strike condition number 1.
I guess I struggle a little bit because I actually think it's the best solution of the two. So maybe I'll pull back my motion. I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more. I can't look down the board and see people's eyeballs, so I don't really know. I think if I got 12 garage doors, you know, I remember going through this on a project not long ago with all of you off of Ingersoll. And, you know, the last thing we want is 12 garage doors on Vale Street with sidewalks and kids and bikes. I realize the historic pattern over many years has been to use that space for kids and bikes, but it is a public right-of-way alley, and I think that makes sense. I think I'd be inclined to leave it as staff has said, but I could maybe get talked out of it if there's anyone on the board that has comments or thoughts.
I'd like to hear more comments or thoughts. I mean, Greg, you shared some good ideas. How do other people feel?
This is Greg Jones. I agree with Greg Wautier. Makes sense to use the alley. So I'd leave it as written.
This is Will here. You know, this is one of the early developments of this part of the city that is planned to have a more dense environment in the first place. And so if we start, you know, waffling on this one, we've set a precedent already that we are not really so much interested in seeing this as a densely built up neighborhood. So if there's some wiggle room later down the road in terms of design, using the alley or some kind of a whatever, I would favor including number 1 in the motion as well.
Others? Does somebody want to make a motion? Or Greg, did you pull back your motion?
Yeah, I did, but I think I'll put it back out there and see how the board feels. I'll move staff and leave items 1 and 2 in the motion.
Okay.
And I might want to clarify, we do have a couple of people that have raised their hands in the audience. We have to point out that the public input has been closed for item 5, and it is in the commission's discussion and motion phase.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor.
Roll call.
Okay, roll call.
Abby Chungith.
I have to recuse myself.
Okay. Rocky Spizzato.
Hey, his mic is muted, you know. Rocky.
Yeah, Rocky, I'll see if I can unmute it.
We haven't been able to.
It was for a while.
It looks like it's functioning now, Rocky.
Okay.
I go to support.
Will Page.
Yes.
Jack Helms.
Yes.
Emily Webb.
Yes.
Dory Browse.
Yes.
Jan Freed,
Yes?
Jackie Easley,
Yes.
Lisa Howard,
Yes.
Carolyn Jensen,
Yes.
Greg Jones.
Yes.
Motion for item number 5 passes 11-0-1. Abby Chungeth abstained from the vote.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on item number 6. Request from Pinnacle on Fleur, represented by Randy Walters, for review and approval of the following for property located at 2710 and 2500 Fleur Drive. The subject properties are owned by Village at Grays Lake, LLC. A, determination as to whether the requested PUD conceptual plan amendment is in conformance with the plan DSM creating our tomorrow comprehensive plan. And B, first amendment to the Village at Grays Lake PUD to define lot 5 of the plan to be developed with 20 3-story row building type townhomes. Eric?
Can everybody see the map up on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the AIB former campus at Bell Avenue and Fleur Drive up here in the northeast corner. The subject area that's really in question is an undeveloped portion of the overall campus. There used to be dormitories here that there was fire, and those have been demolished in the last couple years. These garage units still exist there, but when the PUD got approved last year, the stipulation was that this piece of property known as Lot 5 in the PUD conceptual plan would require further amendment in order to define the development on this portion. So this is the amendment coming forward to propose that. This is looking west across the property. You see the garages there, and then you can also see some of the other buildings down the hill to the northwest. This is looking more straight to the northwest. Again, you're starting to see more buildings on the existing campus. And then this is looking along the front of the property as it comes up to Fleur Drive, and you can start to see the Butler Mansion parking in the off to the right up the hill on the other side of Fleur. The submitted concept plans should have been included in your packet that you received. This is the layout that they're proposing for Lot 5. It would include 20 row houses in 3 groupings with an internal drive system that has a necessary turnaround as well for fire access, emergency access. There are a few proposed visitor parking spaces there, but this would essentially only have enough units that it would only require one access point, and they would use the existing access point from Fleur. Basically, the reasoning for that is because of the median opening there to have full access for both directions on Fleur as well. If they didn't have that, then they would probably needed another cross access up to this point, which is the other full access drive onto Fleur. I'm going to go back one. They're showing the relief here. This is going to sit up again high. You saw how the terrain dropped off to the north and the west quickly, so that for the most part, everything kind of drains northwest. They're proposing to landscape heavily around the site. If you zoom in to this area, they are showing what's called a frontage buffer along this area, which would screen vehicles that would be parking in that area. The proposed renderings, and I'll let the applicant comment maybe even further on these, show the basic conceptual elevations at this point. You will see a more detailed development plan coming into it as a separate item for your approval. But for the right now, this is a conceptual that basically lays out what's required for the development of the row houses. They're essentially 3 stories with garage access. They have rooftop access points. So every one of them appears like it will have a rooftop patio. And they have kind of gone somewhat plain with the end units facing the bluer side. That is a concern of staff. The other concern is that the materials along here are this is shown as a durable type material. We would want that to wrap around the whole building. If you look at the elevations themselves, they have these areas in between the doors that are not shown as a durable material. Staff would want to see that be the same material that's going around the entire first floor of these buildings. The other piece of it is we would want to see transparency on these end units that face bluer to be more in line with the requirements that we would have for our building types in our new code, and have a facade oriented towards bluer that is more appropriate and doesn't have the blank wall that's being shown here. And again, I'll let them speak to that. So those are kind of the main concerns from an architectural standpoint. The other thing is there's a few other things, like we want to define their fencing requirement for their fencing material, something decorative or more in line with what we would want in our buffer yards. I'm going to go right to the staff report recommendation. If you look at the bottom, can everybody see the bottom there?
Yes.
So first of all, we believe this is consistent with the community mixed use designation for the property. That includes a mix of commercial. Within the campus, there's going to be this mix of uses: residential, office, commercial use. So we believe it's consistent with that as part of the overall PUD. We do recommend approval of the PUD conceptual plan, subject to the requirements for final Mylar documentation, with the addition of a statement to how stormwater management is handled with future development. Landscaping requirements should be indicated listing standards reflective of the conceptually shown landscaping, which I think is actually in excess of what the original PUD was approved, would have indicated C2 landscaping, but I think they're showing a beefier amount of overstory trees, which we're supportive of. We just want to make sure that their standards reflect that. Then we want to make sure that the following notes are placed on the conceptual plan: street trees spaced 30 feet apart from the right-of-way along each frontage, trees no closer than 15 feet to a street light. Perimeter landscaping, again, that was the area there we saw in the park, the guest parking area. We want to make sure it's either providing
you are muted.
Foot berm or landscape screen. The 12-foot in depth would make it such that they could achieve the berm. We would want shade trees and shrubs provided.
You are unmuted.
1 tree and 3 shrubs per 40 lineal feet. We do want to make sure there's pedestrian access from any building to street sidewalk. They are showing that a common walk through integral to the private drive, and they are showing that it connects to the public street. We want to make sure that the lighting along any of these walks is a maximum of 15 feet in height to be pedestrian in scale. We don't want mechanical equipment. We want that provided in the street. We don't want that provided on any street side yard, and it should be set back at least 15 feet behind the front facade of the closest facade to Fluor, basically. Any mechanical equipment interiors shall be softened with landscaping material outside any equipment clearance setbacks, making sure that we're not violating any codes for the mechanical code. Mechanical vents shall not protrude from any street-facing facade off of any building. A minimum of a 5-foot sidewalk is required along each frontage, which I believe will either happen with this project or with a future street project for Fluor upcoming. And then we do want them to identify the provision of either indoor or covered bike parking amenity. We want to make sure easements are provided for shared vehicle pedestrian ingress egress between sites to the public sidewalk, and that includes between sites within the whole PUD. So there needs to be the thought of having some connection to the other parts of the PUD, not just within this site specifically. Direct light trespass beyond property lines is prohibited. We just want to make sure they're giving us a lighting plan that demonstrates they're not spilling light onto other properties that surround them. We want a final development plan to discuss any final development plan that they bring forward. We want to make sure that they're identifying how they're going to deal with trash removal, if that's through individual households or if they're going to have a common collection point. They need to identify that on any final development plan. We want them to provide for site fencing, what the standards are for site fencing and walls to include the maximum height, design, materials. Fencing in the front yard between the road homes and Fluor should not exceed 4 feet in height, and that can be decorative, preferably decorative. We do want them to revise the townhome elevations to label the required materials. We want them to provide, I'm going to have to look, it's blocking my view of this, so I can't read it, so hold on a second. We want them to show stone material wrapped around 360 degrees of the building, as I mentioned, at the main story level, exclusive of door openings and window openings. We want to show end unit elevations for facades of units closest to Fluor with separate pedestrian entrance, either from the garage or the unit that would have a walkway to the private drive. The clearance should be defined with a design appropriate awning or cover. So we want some element over that door facing Fluor to give it a predominant feature as an entrance. And then we want to make sure that they're showing a minimum of 12% transparency on the facade of the lower garage floor ends of the building oriented toward Fluor. I do want to point out that the tax abatement requirements may require a higher percentage for them to be able to get tax abatement. Here's some of the cards that we received. And at the end, I'll show you the map so you can see where they're coming from. So you can see that the cards came mostly from the Druid Hill area to the southeast, or the properties over to the west of Southwest 23rd Street, and you can see the small circles that are either colored green or red are representative of how they responded. Are there any questions at this point from the commission?
Eric, this is Will. I have a question. When do the cards for or opposed come into the to staff?
So the cards go out with 10-day notices, which are mailed 10 days prior to the hearing, and they generally come in right away within the next couple days after that, all the way up to the hearing.
It would be very helpful for me actually to be able to see the cards beforehand, or actually to give the respondents the courtesy of having a chance to look at them more carefully. Is there any way that the cards could be scanned and emailed out to the commissioners, even at the time of the meeting itself?
Can you unmute Glenna? Glenna will have a response to that. We did have that discussion, Will, but I think we're limited.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just took my headphones off. Will, we've spoken about this, and at this time it's our position that the cards need to come in at the time of the hearing. We don't want to give any party preference over another by giving those in advance of the hearing. So that's not something that we are doing at this time. We did speak about it. If that changes, we can look into it further, but we have considered this and decided that it was just not something that would be appropriate given due process consideration.
Okay.
I would say also, we thought about it similarly to what happens at your actual meeting, which is you all get the cards at the table and look at them at the table. And so the intent is to give you that same type of experience virtually.
Yeah. Thank you, for raising the question and having a good discussion, Glenda.
Will, also, if I could add, cards can still come in up until the city council hearing on rezonings as well. So it's really up until the council meeting where those written cards impact the percentage calculations of support or opposition. So there may be even more cards that come in than you would see when you considered the item.
I see. And city council will be reading the cards the same way online that we are?
Yes, we put the cards, well, first of all, they get all of the cards that are in at the time that the packets go out with your letter from the commission. Sometimes additional ones come in at the meeting themselves. So as long as they come in before the council closes the hearing, that's accepted.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Eric on item number 6?
Hi, Eric. This is Greg. So when this will come back with more detailed elevations and materials, correct?
That is correct. Because this is a PUD, the new ordinance requires that PUD final development plans come back through for your consideration and the city council.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay, is the applicant here for item number 6? And if so, state your name and address. You know, Eric, if the applicant here?
I believe that Chad.
We have a hand raised.
Yeah, we have a hand raised.
Okay.
I've unmuted the person at the 570 phone number. Or 557, excuse me. Is this the applicant?
I believe we had one person who had asked to speak on the item, as a part of the public, I believe Jenny Smith is the person who had notified us ahead of time.
I had communication from Cooper Crawford today. I was expecting one of their...
Sorry, am I still muted?
No, you're not. Could you please give your name and address?
Yeah, Chris Thompson, Cooper Crawford and Associates, 475 Southwest or South 50th Street, West Des Moines. We're in agreement with all of staff's recommendations, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the applicant? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition of item number 6? Anyone want to speak in opposition for item number 6? Okay. Is it time to close the public hearing? No.
Dan, if you could just state how people would participate if they were trying to call in. Again, they can hit *9 if they're calling or raise their hand.
And if they're on Zoom. And you do that by looking at the participant list. So is it time to close the public hearing? Okay. I'll close the public hearing for item number 6. And when we close the public hearing, then it's time for the commission to discuss.
We take a motion, Madam Chair.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Jack Helmus, I move staff.
Okay. Any discussion on this from the commission? Okay. I think roll call. We've got a motion.
Carolyn Jennison.
Support Jack. Motion.
Jan Freed.
Support. Yes.
Jackie Easley.
Yes.
Emily Webb.
Yes.
Abby Chungith.
Yes.
Rocky Spizzato.
Yes.
Will Page.
Yes. Yes.
Lisa Howard.
Yes.
Greg Jones.
Yes.
Greg Wadier.
Yes.
Dory Browse.
Yes.
Motion for item number 6 passes 12-0.
Thank you. Item number 7. Request from ND Drake Multifamily, represented by Alexander Bergerich, for review and approval of a Type 2 design alternative public hearing site plan in accordance with Chapter 135, Section 135-9.2.4 and 135-9.3.1b, to waive the minimum requirement for spacing of entrances on the University Avenue primary frontage, and to waive the minimum number of required off-street parking spaces for property located at 2530 University Avenue, all to allow development of the property with 4-story mixed-use building with 136 household units and 6,000 square feet of ground floor retail office use. Mike?
Is everybody able to see the screen?
Yes.
Jason, could you guide me on expanding to full screen view?
What about if you go over a little bit further, the icon that's a box with the two arrows, is that it for this? So you got the plus and the minus?
Yeah, I'll have to zoom in.
I think if you use that right there, I think that might be the...
Okay. Sorry for that. Chair and members of the commission, Michael Ludwig, Planning Administrator for the City of Des Moines. Before you is this aerial photo showing the site location. It's located at the southeast corner of 26th Street and University Avenue. As you'll recall, a few months ago, you did rezone this property to MX2 zoning. And you also recommended approval of vacation of the alley that is running between this property and the former First Christian Church site. That alley has not been vacated by the City Council yet. It is scheduled for an upcoming council meeting for consideration of vacation and conveyance to the applicant. Real quickly, site shots. This site shot is taken from University Avenue, just the corner north edge of the site, looking towards the First Christian Church or former First Christian Church. The next photo is looking at the site from 26th Street to the east. You can see Dogtown in the distance, and Drake University would be to the left edge. This is the middle of the site, again, pretty much looking due east. And then this would be the looking more towards the south and southeast on the site. And then finally, this would be at the far south end of the site, looking pretty much due east. As far as the site goes, the request goes tonight, there are a couple things I want to point out very quickly. Let me jump to the page. On this site, you'll see that the landscape plan rendering, there's a couple things to point out here. First of all, in the request is relief to the separation distance between doorways on University Frontage. One of the doors is located where the arrow is shown here. The other is located approximately here. Under the new code, it requires those doors to be, the code states 45 feet separation. Under a type 1 design alternative, which would be a staff administrative review, we could vary that by 30%, which would take it up to almost 59 feet. These doorways exceed that separation requirement. So it automatically kicked this into a type 2 design alternative for separation of the doorways. In the staff report, I'll note that we pointed out that there is about 4 feet of grade differential from this corner of the site to the east edge of the site. And so we do believe that the grade separation and change in grade warrants a further separation of those doorways as it relates to the floor levels in the building. So again, we could have approved that administratively if it would have been less, 30% or less increase in that separation distance. But since it was greater, we could not approve that administratively. So that is in front of you tonight. The next item that is in front of you tonight on this request is regarding parking. They are proposing 42 off-street parking spaces in this parking lot behind the building. There are also 6 motorcycle parking spaces right at this location for a total of 45 off-street parking spaces. They also propose 4 on-street parking spaces along University that would be adjoining their frontage. That would take them up to 49 provided parking spaces. They have a requirement under the code of providing 90 parking spaces, and that already takes into account a 40% reduction in the required parking for a site that is zoned MX2. So if this was not zoned MX2, then required number of spaces would be well over 100 parking spaces on the site. Also in the area, they have no parking is allowed on the east side of 26th Street. On the west side of 26th Street, you'll recall the Planning Commission did approve the hotel project that is under construction that the same developer is building. That hotel has its own off-street parking lot that provides all of its required parking. And so one of the things that you'll see in the staff recommendation is we believe that there are approximately 9 on-street parking stalls on the west side of 26th Street. Under the code, our code would not let them count parking frontage that's not directly abutting their frontage. So being on the opposite side of the street requires a type 2 design alternative from the Plan and Zoning Commission. The final thing, if you count those 9 spaces, they would be at 58 of the required 90 spaces, which would be about 64% of the required parking for the site. Staff did have conversations with the applicant throughout this review about the ability to secure off-site parking agreements for the property. They have not proposed any such agreements to date. If they did propose those agreements, the off-site parking areas would have to be within a 750-foot radius of the subject property, and they would need some sort of relief from the Planning Commission, a type 2 design alternative to allow residential parking to be provided off-site. At this point, the applicant is not proposing any off-site agreements. They essentially are asking for a waiver of the additional spaces between either 49 or 58 spaces and 90 required, depending on whether or not the commission grants the type 2 relief of the on-street parking on 26th Street. With that, just one second. We are recommending several things on this. First of all, staff is recommending that the type 2 design alternative for the spacing of the doorways and the number of doorways on University Avenue be approved. We are recommending approval of the type 2 design alternative to allow the on-street spaces on the west side of 26th Street to be counted towards the minimum required parking. Staff is recommending denial of the type 2 alternative to allow a waiver of 32 required parking spaces. We are recommending approval of a type 2 design alternative to allow 32 required spaces for residential use to be provided off-site and within 750 feet of the subject property, subject to provision of agreements for those spaces. When the commission considers this, you have a couple of options. The way it's written, if you want to just grant the waiver of the 32 spaces, you would just delete condition number 4. If you agree with the denial of item number 3, you would keep item number 4. Finally, the final condition is we are recommending approval of the proposed public hearing site plan subject to the following. 1 would be revision of the site plan and building elevations to comply with any relief granted through type 2 design alternatives. The second would be revision of the site plan and building elevations to comply with all administrative review comments. And type 1 design alternatives that staff has already approved, and then also any applicable urban design review board comments not addressed by either the type 1 or type 2 design alternative. And then finally, approval of the site plan would be subject to vacation and conveyance of the alley right-of-way by the council to the developer as necessary for this project. As far as the consent map goes, we had one card that we received in support of the project. It was the immediately adjoining property owner to the south. I do believe that we have 7 individuals that notified us ahead of the meeting that they would like to speak. All 7 of those people that requested to speak are in support of the project. There may be others that are present who also want to speak. Available if you have any questions.
Questions for Mike from the commission?
Hi, Mike. This is Greg. I have 2 questions. Whenever I look at or think about relief of parking when we put these buildings next to neighborhoods, I'm curious what kind of signage and parking is allowed up and down the adjacent streets of the homes, and just wondering if we're just moving a problem or if there's a way to control it. I understand many of these folks may not have a vehicle. I understand that, but I'm just wondering if you know up and down the streets adjacent to this, what kind of parking control or signage there is.
Great question, Greg. Just on this map, I'll point out, so there's no parking on the east side of 26th Street. You can see the on-street parking that's occurring on the west side. So the 9 spaces of on-street parking that I was referencing all are between basically the south edge of this property extended across to the north. So under the code, for us to count staff to count those 9 spaces, they would have to be on the east side of the street. Since there's no parking there, it takes a type 2 design alternative for us to count 9 spaces in this area towards the required parking here. Again, we felt that that was appropriate on the basis that this development on this property has all of its required parking available off-site, and we have the same developer doing both projects, so there has not been any objection to those 9 spaces being counted for parking on this site. They're not needing it for this development here.
No, I think I understand that, Mike. My question, which may lead to a comment, is if I go further south, is that 26? I can't read the number.
Yes.
If I go further south, and this might be crazy talk, but I mean, the key is to not have folks living in the apartments parking all night in front of homes down south, right? I just didn't know if would staff or the neighborhood ever entertain, no parking overnight hours, and I'm just thinking of the homeowners down below, not happy if there are people parking in front of their houses all night.
Another great question, Greg. I mean, that's obviously why we're having the hearing this evening, is to give notice of that. Obviously, our public streets are public. There is no guarantee that that on-street parking is reserved for the immediately abutting house. And so, just as these 9 spaces along this frontage could be counted as the required parking, anyone could park there, whether they are a resident or a commercial tenant or a patron of one of those businesses for this development. We clearly, I think our parking standards, again, allow for a reduction of 40% already, which got us down to the 90 required spaces. So this would be a further reduction below the normal standards of the code.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mike? Okay, is the applicant here? I think I see Alexander, you've got your hand up, so just state your name and address.
Hi, Alexander Gugarich, 218 6th Avenue, Suite 200, Des Moines, Iowa, 50309.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thanks for the time tonight. This is definitely a game-changing project for the neighborhood, and I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to this project, talk about the 3 reasons why this variance and reduction in parking required is needed. First, because of the unique site and context of this neighborhood. 2, because of affordable housing reasons. And 3, because of future plans within the neighborhood. So first, Nelson Construction and Development, we've been around 20 years. We're definitely a responsible landlord and responsible for a lot of the development that occurs downtown Des Moines. Our projects are buildings like E300, the Zombie Burger building in the East Village, the Fleming building in the core of downtown Des Moines, Rowett Lofts in the Market District of the East Village, the Des Moines building in the core of downtown Des Moines, the AP Lofts in the Warehouse District by St. Kilda, and 418 East Grand in the heart of the East Village. The type of landlord that we are, we have on-site property management at all of these assets, and we will at this project as well, so that if neighbors do have concerns as we open and feel that our tenants are not being good neighbors, we have people on site that can field those complaints and interface with the neighbors. We also have a track record, as you think about those projects, of building up the urban areas around us. We don't seek to just come in and do projects and extract value as a landlord and developer. We work cooperatively and collaboratively with everyone around us to really uplift urban spaces in Des Moines. I think the other thing about us is when problems do come up over the course of years, we solve them creatively. A good example would be all those assets I just listed are very constrained and have very little parking. Some of them have 0 parking spaces. So E300, where Zombie Burger is, as the East Village developed and we heard more and more from neighbors that there were parking problems, we actually went ahead and just opened a parking ramp where 135 spaces are public, available to the city leases from us, and then 2 other floors of parking that help satisfy parking demand in the area. I only bring that up because if problems do occur, I think it's important to note that we're responsive and solution focused, and you can see that through our actions, not just our words. As far as how we got to this project, Drake issued an RFP actually 4 years ago to 11 developers around the country, and they said, here are 2 parcels of land. If you bought them from us, what would you do with it? We really want to transform the neighborhood, and it's long overdue because the Drake neighborhood has so much potential. So we pitched a hotel and retail building as the first project, and then the second project was an apartment and retail building, which is what we're here to talk about today. When Mike talks about us having met our parking requirement on the hotel, I would say we over-met that requirement. We have 114 parking spaces on site, which should more than take care of the hotel and retail needs for that project. When we looked at the apartment and retail project, we've been working with Drake and the neighbors in the area to find design that worked for everybody. And I think when you hear from all the people here in support, I think you'll see that we collaborated and achieved that. For years, people have been talking about bringing development from downtown into the neighborhood, and this is definitely a sign of that happening. And parking's always a thorny issue, but it's something that we feel like this is a unique situation and should be granted relief. The other thing I'd note is that the form-based code that requires this parking took effect in the middle of our plan. As I talked about, we've been at this for 4 years, and so we still think we have a project that's good for the neighborhood and won't have a parking problem, but we have had to deal with really being the first big project to have the form-based code applied to us. So the 3 reasons why we believe we need this parking relief and you should grant it. First, this is a really unique site and context. This is not just any MX2 zoned area. This is within the Drake neighborhood. And because of that, our project has 135 units. Although we're market rate and not student housing solely, I think we all can agree that we're going to have a lot of students that live there, in which case they'll be parked either on campus because it costs $125 a year, it's extremely cheap, or they'll just be carless. We see that happen downtown all the time when we have tenants that work at major employers that give them parking for free. Their parking may be in a ramp 8 blocks away, but the tenant's fine with that because they really only get their car once or twice a week. We think there will be a similar effect with the students that might live in our building and choose to park off-site because it is so cheap. The other thing I would say is the retail customers that would be coming to the retail along University are not necessarily going to be parked at our site. Because this is such a pedestrian-friendly area, we will have a lot of people coming that we don't need to satisfy that parking need, students as well as others. If you look at the walk score database online, Drake, this site actually has a walk score of 81, which they deem very walkable. For context, our Rowett Lofts project in the East Village only has a walk score of 62. And so you would think downtown would actually be more walkable and multimodal, but realistically, this neighborhood with an 81 walk score is extremely walkable and open to other means of transportation. The other reason this site is unique and should provide context, we are on a transit route, right on a main transit route, and not just near any transit route, but really on the route that has the best lifestyle routes with the highest frequency. So I used to chair DART's track committee, that's the Transit Rider Advisory Council, because I have gone carless in this city. So I'm not just speculating, I know this to be true. Route 3 has the highest frequency throughout the metro, and Route 60 truly is a lifestyle route that someone could go carless and loop from downtown, down the University Avenue corridor to 42nd and back down Ingersoll. There's also B-cycle stations in the area, and because of all these reasons, this is not just any MX2 site. This is a site that really should be granted parking relief because it is so multimodal. For that reason, the Urban Design Review Board actually recommended this parking site plan at our first preliminary meeting and passed this project. And they made specific reference to the parking that they were fine and supportive of it. The other thing I would just note that Greg mentions down 26th Street and not wanting to hassle those neighbors. First, the neighbor that's immediately adjacent is here to speak in support. But as you keep going down 26th, that is a majority of that housing is actually multi-tenant housing that they carved up. And so they also have, so it's not like homeowners there that we're worried about infringing on the use of their home. The second main reason to support parking relief here is really the issue of affordable housing. The Business Record within the last month actually wrote an article about how there are projects trying to solve the affordable housing problem without getting low-income tax credit, and they're doing it through design. And they specifically mentioned our project and highlighted our project because the reason we're at 135 units is because many of them are micro and studio units. If we had to go buy land to satisfy the parking ratio, it would drive rents to a point where they won't be affordable. Our studios and micros are going to be able to be rented for $700, $800 a month, depending on the unit, which is extremely, almost impossible really to find in market rate new construction in Des Moines. So we're really caught in this, if we want to hold up affordable housing as a goal, which I think we all agree is a goal, projects like this, if we burden it with parking, we'll have to drive the rent up. Or if I had to reduce my unit count and use the same land in order to hit the parking ratio, then the numbers just wouldn't pencil. And that might be part of the reason why development hasn't really come to the neighborhoods despite people clamoring for it.
Yeah, Alexander, we're at 10 minutes now.
Okay, well then I'll just wrap up. The third reason future plans in the area, I would love to go get off-site parking agreements, but unfortunately there's a rumored parking garage that might get built soon, but I can't show that agreement right now, and I can't wait to do this project and help transform this area, until they build that. Second, the church next door offers a great opportunity for surface parking agreement. However, First Christian Church, while we were developing this, was in due diligence with Hope Lutheran Church, and Hope just closed on it, and they really want to remodel and see how their usage is before they commit to leasing spaces. So with my time expired, I would just say there's very unique extenuating circumstances here, and I would hope you judge us by our actions as a landlord and developer in the community.
Thanks, Alexander. Questions for the applicant? Any questions? Okay. I know there are other people here who want to speak in favor. I think that's what Mike said. So if you want to speak in favor of this proposal, state your name and address and raise your hand, or *9.
So Jan, the 6 people that requested to speak, one was the applicant, Jennifer Sayers from the Drake Neighborhood Association requested to speak. I believe she's on this call right now.
Okay.
Hi, Jennifer Sayers, 1129 28th Street, and I would just like to, in support of Alexander's comments, Nelson has been very good about coming to the Drake neighborhood board meetings and talking through their projects with us, and so I personally am in favor of this.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Ms. Sayers? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay.
Jan, the next person who requested to speak prior to the meeting or submitted their name was an Andrea Tomeo. If Andrea could raise her hand.
I don't see your name really. Do you?
Let's go ahead. Nicole, I think, raised her hand.
Yep, Nicole is the next on the list.
Okay, I'll unmute her.
Okay, so once again, we're talking about item number 7. Okay, Nicole, your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Nicole Axamit Purcell. I own the property to the south of this project. It's 1155 26th Street, Des Moines 50311. I know there's been some concern about the lack of parking for so many new apartments, but I really do think that in the context of the neighborhood plan, it makes sense for us to have higher density housing along bus routes in walkable neighborhoods like ours. And to a degree, I think we have to build for what we want. I personally do not want 150 new neighbors who all have cars. And because this project is not provided, I think that the tenants who want or need ample parking will not choose these apartments. I do suspect a good number of the tenants for these very small units will be college students who have relatively inexpensive access to parking on campus, or others who do not have cars, and hopefully will work at the retail that is in the neighborhood. I will say, to the question about how the parking is right now on the side streets, it is parking only on the west side of the street on 26th Street, and that parking is fairly full overnight. I will say, though, we have a lot of multi-unit rentals, houses that have been split into rental units on this block in particular, but there's also a lot of off-street parking that's accessed through the alleys behind those properties. And I personally am not concerned about parking. I have a driveway and a garage that afford me parking, so I never park on the street. But I do think the street parking generally now, and there is quite a lot of surface parking in the vicinity. On cases like when the Trump rally was at Drake and the streets were full, somehow we managed. So I think people do gravitate for bigger events, surface parking that exists. So I guess overall, I'm not really that concerned about parking. I do worry a little about emergency vehicle access and adequate room for two-way traffic on our street. That's been a concern of mine before this project, just because people sometimes do get confused about that there's only parking on one side of the street, especially during snow days. But as long as the police will enforce that, and we can, you can get an emergency vehicle down the street and you can still drive both ways, I think it'll be fine. I suspect that the hotel folks would also want 26th Street traffic to be unencumbered too, so that people can get in and out of the hotel comfortably. And while I will miss being able to see Old Main from my front door when this project goes up, I do think it will be good for the neighborhood on the whole. And I appreciate that the design has improved considerably since it was presented to the neighborhood association back in December. And I am thankful that Mr. Bukurit has promised to work with us on making the fence and the retaining wall between our home and this project, tie in with what we have and not cut off our driveway approach or garage access. So for all those reasons, I do support the project.
Thank you. A question for Ms. Acker. Okay, thank you. We do have some other hands.
And there was a Jason Stuyvesant that requested to speak ahead of time.
Okay.
Yes, this is Jason Stuyvesant at 2937 Rutland Avenue. I am also vice president for the neighborhood board this year. I'm definitely in favor of the project. While I can definitely appreciate the parking concerns, I just kind of agree with what has already been said. I don't really need to take up time elaborating on that. I think there will be people without cars living there, and also with the transit and walkability factors. I think that's a big bonus. And then especially the factor of trying to offer that affordable housing in the area. It's something that is, talked about over and over. So a developer that is offering that in the neighborhood, I think that can be a great fit, as well as in combination with the hotel. Kind of, I view them almost together, given that their locations with the added retail and expanding Dogtown down the street, and just the overall revitalization along University Avenue. I think all of the wins that this project brings to the neighborhood outweigh the potential for slightly more congested street parking. We have many big events in the area all the time, as Nicole mentioned with the rally, but also Drake Relays and all the things like that. And there's, everybody still manages to find places to park. So just with that, I just think it's a really great win for the neighborhood in both offering the affordable housing that people want, but also the added mixed use with the retail, and just really expanding on what is one of our busiest streets in the area to make Drake a true destination neighborhood.
Thank you. Questions for Jason? Okay, thank you. I see.
And the final person that requested to speak ahead of time was a Daniel Bozeman.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Daniel Bosman. I'm one of the partners at Mars Cafe at 2318 University Avenue. I also owned a house on 28th and Cottage Grove for 10 years and just recently moved out of the neighborhood. But mostly I just wanted to speak of what it was like to live in the neighborhood, and parking didn't never seem to be an issue. I think people in the neighborhood are generally used to street parking and those spots being full a lot of the time, most anyone. And just as far as us at Mars Cafe are concerned, we wanted to say that we were excited about the project, and we're just looking forward to some of these additions to the neighborhood. We've had the cafe in the neighborhood for 14 years and are really excited about some of the developments that are happening down the street. Now it'll tie Dogtown into the Drake neighborhood. Other than that, I think Jason and everybody else covered almost everything today anyways.
Okay, thank you. Questions from Mr. Bosman? Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of this proposal? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Is there anyone online who would like to speak in opposition or has concerns about this proposal?
Again, Chair, if anybody wants to raise their hand, if they're on the phone, it's *9. Otherwise, use the raise hand function in Zoom.
Which you find in the participant list.
Correct.
So is there anyone who would like to express concerns about this proposal? Okay. Oh, wait. A concern?
Just a question. I wondered if you could explain.
Could you state your name and address again, Nicole?
Yes, Nicole Axmit Purcell, 1155 26th Street, Des Moines. I did have a question just about, I wondered if you could know how the alley ties into the parking for this project and clarify for me, because it wasn't clear to me, if the city will retain any kind of right-of-way through the parking for the alley to exit, if that makes sense.
Just 1 second. So, as I stated, the alley right-of-way is proposed to be vacated. That basically comes down to the south edge of the property, and then the public alley continues to the south. There will be an access easement retained that would get vehicles out to preferably out to 26th Street or to the west. But technically, vehicles could also still continue through an easement on the property north and out to University Avenue. Again, preference would be, when we designed this, was the easement going out to 26th Street. So the developer would own the former right-of-way adjoining their property. Do you want to unmute Nicole and see if she has if that answered her question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to understand what the access would be, what access the city would retain. So, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one more time if there's anyone who wants to speak with opposition of the proposal or express concern.
Item number 7.
On item number 7. Seeing none, it's time to close the public hearing. So we're going to close the public hearing, and now it's time for discussion from the commission.
Can I ask, Jack Hilmus, can I ask Mike Ludwig a question? Mike, how far is 750 feet in all these directions?
Well, Jack, the proposed site plan, if you can see this, is about, the site's roughly 150, 160 feet wide. So these are basically, the blocks in this area are about roughly 300 feet in length, between 280 and 300 feet in length. So you're basically talking, 2 blocks in any direction, a little over 2 blocks in any direction.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or discussion from the commission?
I'm comfortable with the plan and striking number 3. And if there's no other comments, I'm willing to make a motion on 1, 2, 4, and 5 and strike number 3.
How do others feel about that discussion?
This is Emily Webb. I agree with Rocky on that.
Okay. All right. Anyone else want to express an opinion?
This is Greg Jones. Mike Ludwig, I thought what you said was that if we allowed 3, we would strike 4. So as I understand Rocky's motion, we're going to strike 3 and read it as 4.
Yeah, what you would do is you would keep 3 and change that to approval instead of denial of the type 2 design alternative for the 32 spaces. So I apologize if I was confusing on that. Condition number 3, you would just change it from denial to approval and then strike condition number 4.
Okay, I make that my motion.
This is Greg again. So Rocky, is that what you'd like?
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a motion. And any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion. Roll call, Tyler.
Dory Briles.
Yes.
Greg Wattier.
Yes.
Jack Helms.
Aye.
Greg Jones.
Yes.
Lisa Howard.
Yes.
Will Page.
Yes.
Abby Chunga.
Yes.
Emily Webb.
Yes.
Jackie Easley. Jackie Easley. Jackie's still with us?
I don't see her on the call.
Okay. Moving on to Jan Freed.
Yes.
Carolyn Jennison.
Yes.
So with Jackie's absence, we got a motion carried 11-0.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 8, request from Michael Horsfall for report approval of a type 2 design alternative in accordance for public hearing site plan with chapter 135, section 135-9.2.4 and 135-9.3.1B for property located at 3850 10th Street to allow retention of a 20-foot by 20-foot carport structure accessory to the existing one-house dwelling. Jason?
Yes, this is Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. Let me get my screen up for you guys and we'll get started. Everybody has the map in front of them?
Yep.
Okay. This map identifies the subject property just to the north of Douglas Avenue on the east side of 10th Street. You can see in the aerial the dwelling. We have the garage and then the subject carport that we'll be discussing tonight to the south of the garage. Photograph of the property looking north and east. Photograph from the alley looking towards the north, towards the carport and the applicant's garage. A site sketch that was submitted with the application, just showing square footages and location on the property. Have a photograph and a drawing from the applicant as part of his application, just describing how the carport was constructed and just providing some dimensions. And then a copy of the staff report. And a couple things that I just want to highlight. When with these type 2 review, we did include in the staff reports the criteria that the commission is supposed to look at as we review these requests. I want to bring that to your attention. That was on pages 2 and moves over into page 3. And then a part of that is some criteria that looks at the character of the surrounding area. And so that's kind of the premise of what our recommendation is based on, is that, you know, what do we find within that 250 feet notice area? And I'll come back to that here in a minute.
The Chapter 135, the Planning Design Ordinance, does have a definition and some allowance for carports. However, it requires them to be attached to a principal building. A freestanding one would be considered an accessory structure, and then when you get to that section of Chapter 135, the closest thing that you'll find to a freestanding carport is the outbuilding or detached garage. You can see in the staff report, we've italicized the definition of the language from the code that talks about it being a fully enclosed building. So, long story short, to do a carport that's freestanding, the only way to construct that would be to get a type 2 design alternative approved by the commission. It's not something that staff could approve with a type 1. As I mentioned, we did analysis of the other parcels within the 250 feet and found that there was only one other example within that notice area of a carport structure, and I've listed the address in the staff report. So based off of there not being a predominant character of carports freestanding in the neighborhood, and then also we noted in the staff report that carports in general don't necessarily have the same kind of permanent nature as an outbuilding, and we believe that's why they were excluded from the planning design ordinance. As a result, we are recommending denial of the request. The carport was constructed without a building permit. I overlooked that at the beginning of my staff report. This is the notice area. It's also the 250-foot boundary. The outer line is to the 250 feet that looked at for some other carports in the area. We did not receive any comments or communication from any neighbors, so I don't have any letters or cards, or email to share with you. Happy to answer any questions that you have, and I do believe the applicant is with us tonight. I visited with him earlier today, and he had indicated that he was going to participate, and I think I saw him on the list.
Okay.
Jason, this is Greg Jones. I have a question.
Yes.
If this were called a gazebo instead of a carport, does that change anything?
I don't believe so.
So a gazebo is not allowed?
Well, I don't think that, I guess I'd have to look back in the code and see how we would interpret or what kind of definition we have for a gazebo. So I can't, if you want to give me a moment, I'd happy to see if I can find that. Without that, I can't say for sure one way or the other.
Jason, I can look up that answer for you while you're continuing.
Thank you, Eric.
Other questions for Jason? Okay, is the applicant here? Please state your name and address.
Yes, this is Mike Horsfall, 815 10th Street. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. The main reason that I built this was because my wife is severely handicapped. When we would park in the back, there would be mud, snow, rain. It was extremely dangerous for her. She does fall from time to time. This structure, which is made from block that is reinforced with steel and concrete, so it is a long-term structure, and because it stays dry, and I've got a small concrete sidewalk next to it, it allows her to walk right up to the car and to get into her car without fear of falling. And I had also asked, well, what's the difference between this and a gazebo? Because it's designed exactly the same way. And I was told that all structures that are more than 120 square feet must be completely enclosed.
You are unmuted.
I said, that doesn't make sense.
You are muted.
Gazebo, you know, that wouldn't be closed on all four sides. This is a very nice looking carport that is well built. I had used 4x6s reinforced by a 2x10. So it is extremely strongly built. And I just want my wife to be able to be safe when she gets into the car and not have a big mud pit out there, which is what we had before. That's about it.
Okay.
You are unmuted.
For Mr. Horsfall.
Yes, I have one, Michael. Jack Helmus, Commissioner. Do you have a handicap permit for your car?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Thank you.
Other question for the applicant. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here who wants to speak in favor of the applicant? Okay. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition or express concern? And again, we're talking about item number 8. Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing.
But before you do, Jan, can I ask one more question, please? Jack Helmus.
Sure. Yeah.
This is for Michael. Michael, is there a garage on the property?
Well, there's a very old garage.
You are muted.
A workshop, and it's not really a super safe structure. I would not allow my wife to park in it.
You are unmuted.
And in the next few months, that's one of the things that I plan to do is to request upgrades for that. Because you can see that there's blue and white in the back, and there's a garage door there, but it does not work because the doorway is too low, and I plan to request that I upgrade the roof and raise that part up a little bit so it can be used. I have done a lot of work to improve this lot in the last 3 years. When I moved in here, it was full of trees and weeds and just really looked bad. So I would like to improve where I live.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Mr. Horsfall? Okay, is there anyone else who wants to speak on this item number 8? Okay, it's time to close the public hearing. A discussion from the commission. Comments, things to consider?
This is Carolyn, and I am just struggling with the idea if it were a gazebo. I mean, trying to figure out the difference. Would that have been allowed?
Jason, do you want to answer that? Did you see my note?
Eric, go ahead and instead of me trying to find that and read it, go ahead and just update us on what you found as far as information on gazebo.
So gazebos are an accessory structure that's identified in the chapter 135. They're defined as a roof structure with open sides. However, there's also another definition in the definitions of carport, which says a roof structure providing space for the parking of motor vehicles and enclosed on not more than two sides. So the difference is this is being parked under, and we are determining that it's a carport and would not count as a gazebo, where you might see somebody putting a picnic table or chairs under it rather than parking it.
This is Will here, and I'm always concerned about precedents, and this would be one of them. I wish that something in, I don't know. I wish you could approve this and register it all, so that there's some kind of penalty for something that looks like flouting the law.
Well, this is Jan, and I was wondering if there's any provision for, handicap parking.
You are muted.
Jan, is that a question?
Yes, that's a question.
Yeah, there is, since that has been raised,
You are unmuted.
Not information I was aware of, but there is criteria in the Chapter 135 that allows relief to be granted to satisfy federal regulations, including ADA. So that could be something, if the commission is inclined to grant relief, that you would base it off of that and not off of other circumstance. Therefore, we could avoid the concern that Will raised about precedent.
Yeah.
This is Greg. I'm all for that. I think we need to find a way to make this work for the So whatever Jason said, I'd make a motion that we approve this for its handicapped accessibility use or something to that effect.
Okay, is that a motion, Greg?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This is Jack. I'm pretty sure the DOT probably assigned a number to that disability, disabled parking sticker for the car. Maybe we ought to grab that while we're at it.
I will unmute Michael, and maybe he can share that information with us.
Okay.
Yes. What exactly do you need?
Well, Michael, this is Jack Elmas. There's talk about trying to grant you some relief here. It's a little troubling that the structure was built without a building permit, but we're overlooking that for the moment. And your concern for your wife's disability is what's driving the discussion at this point. The discussion is kind of going and drifting in your favor based upon the disability of your wife. I asked you earlier if you had a DOT handicap parking permit. You indicated you did. And I thought that if you did, you would share the number that's on that permit with us so that we could have that in our record as we make our decision tonight.
Can I run out to my car to...
Just real quick, I think if that's something the commission wants, you could just state that you want this tied to the current occupant or owner's basically permit. We don't need them to get the permit number for us, but they can provide that to staff. And then would you be saying it need to be removed if that permit was no longer in place?
I'm not sure I'm that far along yet, Michael.
Greg, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
And I can bring that card to to the building permit office?
You are muted.
So that they can see it and such too, yes?
Or could he email it?
Yeah, Michael, this is Jason Van Esten with staff. I emailed you this afternoon. Did you receive that email?
I believe so, yes.
You could email that information to me at that address, and that would work.
Would you like me to take a picture of the card and then attach that?
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, correct?
You are unmuted.
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion to, make this workable, based on the CPA. So, Tyler, roll call.
Jack Helms?
Yes, we're making an exception here, yes.
Emily Webb?
Yes.
Dory Browse?
Yes.
Lisa Howard?
Yes.
Jan Freed?
Yes.
Carolyn Jennison?
Yes.
Abby Chungeth?
Yes.
Rocky Spadato?
Yes.
Will Page?
Yes.
Greg Wadier?
Yes.
Motion to approve item number 8 passes 11-0.
Okay, thank you. Item 9. Request from Living Water and Chemical Free Church of Des Moines, represented by Willonja Ernest Yando, for review and approval of a Type 2 design alternative for public hearing site plan in accordance with Chapter 135, Section 135-9.2.4 and 135-9.3.1B for property located at 2904 Kingman Boulevard to allow reuse of the building for an assembly, place of worship, use with sufficient number of provided on-site parking spaces, and allow waiver of the required curb barriers for the on-site surface parking lot. Sir?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, this is Bert Drost, planner for the City of Des Moines. Item number 9 is a proposal to convert an existing Fraternal Lodge to a church use. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Kingman Boulevard and 29th Street in the Drake neighborhood. The property is zoned P2, which is a public and civic district. So the church use is an allowed use. They're required to provide off-street parking at a ratio of one space per 60. They are saying they would have 150 seats within this church, so they would be required to provide 25 off-street parking spaces. And they're only able to squeeze 6 on this lot. So that's the first Type 2 design alternative they've requested. And then the second, they've requested a waiver of all curbing around the perimeter of the parking lot. Here's a picture of the Fraternal Lodge that they're converting to a church. They're not proposing to make any modifications to the exterior of the building. They're just required to bring the site into compliance with the current landscaping and parking standards. This is the view from Kingman Boulevard. In front of the church on this north side, they would put 4 off-street parking spaces, including 1 ADA compliance stall. This is the south side, so looking west onto the site. They are proposing to put 2 stalls along the south property line. This is just a summary that they've provided outlining their rationale for these 2 design alternatives. And here's the site plan. If you can see the building here to the north of the building, they've proposed 4 spaces. And again, there would be no curbing around the perimeter of those spaces. And then at the south side of the building, you can see the 2 stalls parallel to the drive aisle. Then I'll slide through the staff recommendation. Staff doesn't believe that it's appropriate to grant the design alternative for waiving the wheel barrier requirements. We feel that it's necessary to have those wheel barriers to prevent vehicles from encroaching into the landscaping. But we do feel that it's appropriate to waive the off-street parking requirement. I'll go back to the aerial photo. As I said earlier, they have 6 spots on the site. They're required to provide 25. They are allowed to count on-street parking spaces that immediately adjoin the site, which could technically get them 2 more spaces on the north side along Kingman Boulevard. And then on-street parking on 29th Street is actually on the east side of the street, so they're not able to count those parking spaces there. But the applicant's engineer did do a quick study of off-street parking in the immediate area, and they found that within a block to the west, there are 18 on-street parking spaces available, and then on the block to the east on Kingman Boulevard, there's another 17 spaces available. And then they also indicated that there are a few spaces available along 29th Street. So we did feel that they satisfied the criteria necessary for granting that design alternative to the off-street parking, just because there really isn't any other opportunities to provide on-site parking on this property. Here's the consent map. We just had 2 emails come back in opposition, and I believe those people might be online tonight to address the commission directly. But I will let you read those 2 emails. The first was pretty brief, just stating that these are the residents of 10, 21, 29th Street stating that they're in opposition, and then this is the resident immediately to the west who also is in opposition. So I'll let you read that. But in the meantime, were there any questions for me?
I think Bob Gibson, who's raised his hand, is the representative of the applicant.
Oh, really? Okay. So maybe leave that up while we're still kind of reading, and I'll call on the applicant. Will the applicant come, is the applicant ready to speak, and state your name and address, please?
I am. This is Bob Gibson with Civil Design Advantage, 3405 Southeast Crossroads Drive in Grind. And with regard to these 2 requests, staff has recommended approval of the parking alternative, and obviously we're in agreement with that. And what I did do when I analyzed the on-street parking, where Bert said that it was, found that there was 18 parking spaces to the west and I think 17 to the east, but what I did in counting our total is left, out of that 18, they only took 8 spaces to apply to the church, I think it was, knowing that we leave some room for the homeowners there. Didn't want to consume all their spaces. So that's where that kind of came from. And I would point out, too, that the church only has 50 members, and the building can accommodate about 150 chairs. So the regular Sunday meetings are not going to have 100 people. There may be holidays or special events where there may be that many, but the vast majority of the regular meetings are going to be relatively active. And then with regard to the curbing issue, could we possibly get my site plan back up that showed the paving? There you go. Yeah, those 3 stalls, well, the dark gray is existing paving. So those 3 stalls that are on the north side, they're already there. And what we've done on the east side is the lighter gray there, that's where we put a handicap stall, and that was really the only place it could go. So that's the newer stall. And the curbing is basically on the front end of those stalls where it's required. And it seems, based on staff report, that the only reason for that curb is the reason for the curb is to keep cars from driving into the landscape, which makes total sense. But the reason for denying this, or recommending denial of this request for timbers versus concrete is that it will be seen from Kingman, or they didn't mention 29th, but you got the same situation there. But if we use timbers there, we've also got shrubs planted there, and there will be mulch under those shrubs as well. So those timbers will not be seen whatsoever. Granted, timbers aren't quite the same as concrete, but if they're anchored in well, they will hold cars back significantly. And one of the reasons that the handicap area, the accessible stalls, so that's all new, and that's going to be all new concrete. So we could put the curb there pretty easily. But on the north side, this is just existing asphalt paving, and to cut out and get a curb in there just seems like an expense that really doesn't gain any value to either the church or to the neighborhood, because it's not going to be seen or noticed. So that's our thinking on that second request.
Any questions? Any questions or? Okay. Is there anyone else to speak in favor of the applicant or this proposal? Okay, I see hands up. So,
Jan, this is Mike Ludwig. Prior to the meeting, we received inquiries from 3 individuals that wanted to speak.
Okay.
The first was Melanie Sagepower.
Okay. Oh, okay. She's got a hand up. Okay.
All right. So, a Lawrence Chickelli. And a Jean Riley.
Yep, I see Jean Riley, and she's got a hand up, and I see Joe Henry.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start with Melanie.
Thank you. This is Melanie Sadapur. I own the house at 2912 Kingman, which is immediately to the west of this property. So I have a couple of comments about that map, actually, that we were just looking at, that site plan. It's not realistic because the concrete, that pavement, actually comes up to and even crosses our property line. So this setback that they're showing on this map or on this drawing does not exist. The concrete, like I said, comes right up into our yard. I think that they should have to put in concrete curbs there, one for the setback, just to get them off of our fence a little bit, because they have been parking all along that fence. 2, to protect our fence from their snow plows. We have winter again, pretending that it's not winter today. And 2, because our yard is an organic permaculture garden, and all this parking or this pavement is higher than the level of our yard. So all of the runoff from their parking and their driveway goes right into our yard and garden, which is not acceptable, and that is one of the purposes of curbing, is to protect from runoff. So I don't think that landscape timbers would be sufficient. They're also full of all kinds of nasty chemicals. And again, this drawing is not a realistic drawing of what that pavement looks like. They would have to remove significant amounts of pavement to put plants in there.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for Ms. Dagapur?
Could she please, this is Will Page speaking, could you please point out on the map, or have someone point out on the map for you, the area that you're talking about, please?
Yeah, that whole area there, that's our property line, and that pavement comes up to and even crosses in some points our actual property line. We had it surveyed recently.
I see. The lots in question, as I understand it, are 1, 2, 3, and 4. So your comment is that the design that's proposed doesn't even address that issue. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
As I understood the proposal, the bumps, the curb stops, as I understood it, were at the head of parking lots number 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I'm asking you is that what you're raising is a point that isn't even addressed, so far as I can see, in this particular item, and I just wanted to make sure am I seeing that correctly?
Well, it's my understanding that parking lots are required to have curbing all along them to protect surrounding properties from runoff and from vehicles.
Then, may I ask Jason or Eric or someone to address that question, please?
Yeah, they are required to provide a paving setback from that west side property line. So I would ask the applicant's engineer to address whether or not a survey was done to verify that this is the actual property line and whether they're going to be removing some pavement. Because it could be that they're proposing to remove some pavement to plant these trees here along that west property line. So I would maybe let Bob Gibson address that.
I'm here. Am I on?
Well, should we go ahead with all the concerns and then?
And then let him rebut that at the end, right?
That's what I was thinking. Okay, so hang in there. Who else would like to express concerns about this proposal? And I know, Mike, you mentioned some others. I've got Gene Riley, Joe Henry. Okay, so Gene Riley. Okay, I'm Gene Riley. I live at 1016 29th Street. They seem like wonderful, nice people, but I do have some concerns with the plan, with the, I'm not sure I completely understand this curbing. And secondly, I am kind of concerned about planting the trees on the strip. It's about a 3-foot strip between my driveway and their pavement. And if they plant trees there, what are the roots going to do to my driveway? Yeah, and I don't want them to block me, and I'm really concerned about that because we saw some of that this fall. And also, I want them to make sure that they know that they have to have snow removal, and they can't put the snow in my driveway. Okay, questions from Ms. Riley? Okay, thank you. And I've got Joe Henry. One more thing. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, this is Joe Henry. I was the real estate agent who represented the sellers of the property who had bought it. They had bought this building from a lodge that owned this building beforehand. I just wanted to let the group know that the building, when it was built in 1923, it was built as a church. It's a pretty amazing structure. It was a church from 1923 to the mid-1940s. Then it became an art studio. And then in the late 50s, it was bought by the Oddfellows Lodge, who had it until a year ago. The Again, like I said, it's a pretty amazing building. We met the buyers. I believe Pastor Willie is probably on the phone right now. His congregation is composed of members from the African community, many of which are refugees. It's a very young congregation. They're very respectful. From what I can tell, and they have been in Des Moines for some time, originally located on Hickman Avenue. The other thing that I want to note is that this building, since it was originally built as a church, it actually has an original barrel roof that's kind of hidden under the existing roof line right now. So there's going to be some neat history I hope that the church does preserve down the road. There's also several other churches in the neighborhood within blocks from this one over on Cottage. And then, of course, we have the Thorough Center to the west with a similar footprint, not much parking on site, but they do use the street. So I just wanted to give my support for this community. Again, they're very respectful. If there is some stuff that they shouldn't have done on the west side, Pastor Willie, who's a well-known minister in town, I'm sure he could get with his congregation to make sure that they kind of follow the procedures on that site, as they would on the south side of the property too, next to the person who talked about parking and so forth on that site. So I just wanted to give my my positive feelings about this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from Mr. Henry? Okay. Would anyone else like to speak about this proposal? I see a hand up. Jean Riley again. Sorry, just one more thing. Jean Riley, 101629. I would like to respond to Bob Gibson's comment about 50 people. There are at least 50 children in the yard at any given time. So I've actually been inside, and there are a lot more people than that. And they pack those cars in just like unbelievably tight. Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Riley? Okay, I'm seeing an iPhone here, but I don't know who's all unmuted. Your name?
Yeah, thanks. This is Lori Abendroth, 1010 29th Street, and I'm actually just to the south of Jean Riley as a neighbor. So I just wanted to voice, one, that I think it's really great for a church to come into the neighborhood and be a positive influence. And two, I think I've been here for 5 years, and just in general, that property hasn't been managed well for a long time, meaning the sidewalks, because of the way that the grass is managed and so forth, it keeps eroding the sides, and so the sidewalks are covered in mud. It typically hasn't been shoveled and so forth. So I think some of the maybe frustration too, and just the overall site is just not great management for a very long time. So I don't know if it's possible to have a property manager or something really improve the overall quality of the site, and I think that would help substantially. Just its presence in the neighborhood be a really positive outcome.
Thank you. Could you spell your last name?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, since my name's not showing. It's Abendroth, Abendroth.
Thank you. Any questions for this? Okay. I'm seeing some more hands here. Okay, so I'm going to go to Lauren Ciccelli.
Correct. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Address?
My address is 1021 29th Street. I live directly east of this property in question.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to the site plan, not this one, but the one that shows the parking lots and the parking spaces. Yes, this one. I want to speak in a little opposition to this whole plan because I see that there are 2 parking places that I think they want to make handicap, but they are sticking out into the grassy area, and they're taking up some of the grassy area, and there's not a whole lot around the building as it is, just on the east side of the building. And that's exactly from across from my front yard. So I like to look at the grass area rather than more parking. And again, I think the curbing should be done in concrete rather than railroad ties, because railroad ties is never a permanent fix. We have better materials, and I think it should be done that way. And also, there shows a sidewalk here coming down kind of diagonally and then dumping down onto the sidewalk along the street. That's not there now. And so they are also proposing a sidewalk, which I don't think was in this revised plan here. So those are all good questions I have. I just don't think this has been well thought out. And I would like to see the church succeed, and I would like to see the building and the property improve. And one other thing then, I see that there are 5 trees that are apparently going to be planted along the parkway. And I thought that was more of a city project rather than a private owner putting up those trees. So those trees are either proposed or they will not ever be put in place. So those are my concerns.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Ciccelli? All right. I'm looking for more hands here. Did anyone else want to speak before we go back to the applicant? Okay. So we have time for rebuttal from the applicant. Gibson?
I'll start out with the top, or the first responder.
Yeah, this is the applicant, and again, we're talking about item number 9.
Right. So I'm assuming I'm on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, if we can go on the plan, back to sheet 2 of the site plan.
I'll have to pull that up.
Okay. To answer one of the commissioner's questions, did we do a survey? Yes, we did. And if you look at that page number 2, that's the demolition plan. And as you're aware, the city requires a certain buffer yard around the perimeter, so the minimum is 5 feet. So what we are showing there is the removal of 5 feet of that asphalt or concrete, both on the west side and on the south side.
Mr. Gibson, we're not seeing that online, the drawing, at least I'm not.
I am pulling it up right now.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not. Okay.
Just hold on a second.
Everybody that spoke has only one opportunity to speak. So if you've already spoken, that was your opportunity.
There you go.
Bob, is this it?
That is it. If you can enlarge it a little bit, it might be a little easier to see. But again, the dark gray is the existing pavement. And if you look at the east side and the south side and you see that hatched area there, and it's called out as removed pavement. So that pavement has to be removed in order to create room to plant what the city requires for perimeter landscaping. In regards to the runoff situation, whatever it may be, has been there since the 20s, I would suppose. And so we're not proposing any changes. We're not making it any worse in any way. And in fact, by taking off, 5 feet of pavement, there's a little less impervious surface that water's going to be running off. And so that first 5 feet, as it goes to the northwest, is going to get somewhat captured and a little bit slowed down. It's not going to eliminate it to the property to the west, but it might be a very small improvement. And regarding Ms. Riley's property on the south, those trees in the strip there, you can see there's a little more room for them there. But I will say that those trees on the west and on the south, those are required by the city. And that was actually a concern I had with planting trees there and on the west side, required by city to buffer your property. But it's so tight there, my concern was that you neighbors might have some concern about the trees and providing more shade when you may not want it, and especially neighbor to the west. If you've got some gardening going on there, I was a little concerned about the shade that it might cast on your property as well, but understanding the need and the desire to have a buffer around it too. So that's, I guess in this case, I'm pushing concerns off on the city regarding the trees along the south property line, that they are required. And I guess similarly, the trees shown in the right-of-way along 29th, they're also required by the city, and they are shown on our landscape plan, and this owner is required to put those in. So to answer that question, as far as the comments about it being unmanaged for quite some time, well, it's been vacant, for a while. But I would suspect, and maybe Pastor Willie can address this, but the improvements that they have done on the interior, if that's any indication of how they're going to take care of this place, it's going to be pretty nice. So they will keep it up. Then Mr. Ciccelli's concerns about the new parking, we are required, again, and if we go back to sheet number 3, we are required to provide some accessible parking there, and that really is the only place that it can be done because of the existing grades and slopes on the existing paving. And then, if we go, let's go to page 4, which is the landscape plan. That's where there's been more trees located in there and wrapping that with some shrubs as well, which is a requirement of the city to buffer those and kind of screen those areas from the neighbors. That's where that comes from. So the timbers that I was proposing in lieu of the concrete curbing, I wasn't thinking railroad ties at all. I was thinking like 8x8 ground treated timbers that were pretty heavy duty and very long lasting. The sidewalk that you mentioned that angles up, that again is a requirement from the city that provides accessible access from the sidewalk. It's a sidewalk that ramps and slopes up at no greater than 5% to give ADA approved access. I guess that wraps up.
One more minute, Mr. Gibson.
Yeah, I'm done.
This is Jan. I actually had a question. Yeah, so I'm looking at the staff recommendation about, you really are not open to the idea of curb barrier.
My concern, well, ultimately, if the city says we need to do them, we need to do them. My concern was that the value of them versus the cost of them just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me on something this small. We've got basically 4 parking stalls that we're dealing with. Now, as I said earlier, the handicap stall there, that's got to be new. That's going to be constructed. So we can put a curb in there pretty easily.
Okay.
But on the north one, that's existing, and so there'd have to be some cutting of the existing pavement and forming, and that would be pretty expensive for something that really isn't going to be perceived at all from Kingman Boulevard.
Okay. Well, thank you. Other questions? Any other final questions from Mr. Gibson? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and close the public hearing for item number 9, and it's time for discussion from the commission.
I'll ask a question, please. It's Will Page. As I understand the proposal, the curbs are just for the 3 parking stalls at the north and the handicapped one on the east, not the curb along the driveway on the west. So my question is to the city staff: when the city looked at drainage concerns, did they take into consideration that this asphalt strip along the west and along the south is going to be removed for the trees? And if so, did they find that that was appropriate?
Sure. Yeah, this is Bert Dross with the city staff. Since they were actually removing pavement and not adding impervious surface, they didn't have to do a full stormwater management plan. As far as the curbing, you're right, it is only required at the front of parking spaces to prevent the cars from rolling forward into the landscaping. So no curb would be required along the west side property line.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Other discussion from the commission?
Jan, this is Greg Jones.
Uh-huh.
I agree with staff. I just don't.
What happened?
Greg?
We lost you.
Yeah, I cut out. I didn't hear what you said.
Well, you muted me. Now you unmuted me. I don't think a timber curb is appropriate. So I think it should be concrete curb. And whether or not they have to remove a little bit of asphalt or just pour it as a straight curb, it's a lot stronger. It's going to last a lot longer. And no matter how you anchor a timber curb, it's not going to stay. And so I just think it needs to be a concrete one. So that's my opinion on the curb.
Okay. Other discussion? I would tend to agree with Greg. I just think it's much more permanent, and timber does not sound like a very good alternative to me. But other comments or discussion?
Did anybody move staff yet?
No, we don't.
I will. It's Jack. I will.
Okay. We have a motion. And we've had discussion. Tyler, roll call, please.
Rocky Spizzato.
Yes.
Dory Browse.
Yes.
Lisa Howard.
Yes.
Carolyn Jennison.
Yes.
Will Page.
Yes.
Dory Browse. Oh, sorry. Greg Jones.
Yes.
Greg Wadier.
Yes.
Emily Webb.
She's muted. She's asking for unmute.
I don't.
Tyler?
Emily Webb. Is Emily unmuted?
Yes, now I am.
Abby Chungith?
Yes.
So we have a motion to approve item number 9, 11, 0.
Tyler, you can call me, or did you just count me?
What's that?
You forgot Jan.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jan.
That's okay.
Thought I said her name.
Are you a yes or no, Jan?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. So now we do have a motion to approve item number 9, 11, 0.
Okay, thank you. Item 10, request from Helena Industries, represented by Anthony Benedetto, for review and approval of a Type 2 design alternative and Type 1 design alternative for public housing, or public hearing site plan in accordance with Chapter 135, Section 135-9.2.4 and 135-9.3.1b for property located at 3525 Vandalia Road to allow development of a 35,820 square foot warehouse workshop building where there would be loading and overhead door access within the front yard area, where metal material would be used as an alternative, a major material for the primary frontage facade, and as a minor material for all other facades, and where the street-facing facade does not provide windows, minimum requirements for transparency, and blank wall limitations. Eric.
Yes, Madam Chair. Can you see the screen now with the map? Okay. So the subject property for Helena Chemical is all of this area here that you see. The area that's in question for the project is the area zoned I2, industrial, heavy industrial, basically. They have other parts of their campus that are zoned EX under the way the new code adopted the zoning map. So this is looking to the southeast from directly north. There's an existing building, warehouse building, that was permitted under the old code that's under construction currently. So that's why you see that activity. And then this is looking more towards the southwest as you see their existing building on their campus. So the site plan area that we're talking about is this, it's actually fairly large relative to the, what we think of as large, but it's a small portion of their overall campus. This is the process building to the south here that's under construction. Actually, I think it's this building that's under construction. I'm sorry, this is their warehouse. This is the building under construction. So they had already had a site plan approved for that also included a landscape plan, and you'll see that here when I file through the sheets here. But basically, they're adding paving to this area. There would be an outlet that will be constructed actually before this site that will connect over to the Des Moines cold storage property to the east. And then their loading function would be up here, and that's one of the issues that we're having to deal with, is this apron in front of the building is actually considered loading area that's in the front setback of the building, and so that is one of the appeals that's necessary. This is looking in a little closer. This is the overall landscaping plan that was developed for the campus itself, and was part of a previous, part of a previous approval. So it's treating heavily the area out in front of the building. It's also where the stormwater appears to be located. So there'll be a feature there in the front of the building between there and Vandalia Road. This is the building in question. The Vandalia facing facade is this facade here. Again, the issues that are with this are the transparency issue and the blank wall limitations, and then the construction material being metal as the major facade material, and then the layout of the parking in front of the building between Vandalia and the proposed building front. So those are the three things in question here. When you go to the staff report, they've been laid out starting on page 3. I'm sorry, starting on page 4, and then carrying over to 5, and then the staff rationales on 5 and 6. The first one that is spoken to is the design alternative for the front yard area. Again, this is part of a campus setting at this point, so they're having to, this isn't just a fresh site standalone. They are having to develop within the context of their existing campus, which has loading drives and drive accesses in front of their buildings between Vandalia Road and their buildings. Part of their challenge too is making sure that they maintain emergency access around the building. So that had some factor in the matter with regard to where they were providing some access for loading into their building. So staff isn't as concerned about that particularly. However, we do want to make sure that they are following their overall landscaping plan to soften up the appearance of that loading activity occurring in the front. The type 2 for the transparency. So the requirement is that the warehouse workshop building type have a 12% transparency minimum on the frontage facade, and that they also prohibit any rectangular area of that facade from having an area greater than 15 feet to be without transparency. So that if you took a measuring stick and went every 15 feet, there should be a transparency, a window basically, somewhere within that 15 feet, and then there should also be no area on this facade greater than 30% of the whole facade that would be without a window. Then the last one is the metal material. They've chosen material that matches the other buildings on their campus. The current ordinance now seeks to have a primary material on the street-facing facade that would have at least 60% of the facade in that material. Metal is not one of those permitted materials. Metal can be considered as a minor material, but then it also has to be in the form of an architectural panel system, composite metal or Corten metal, to be in the minor material list. It's not a prohibited material, so the fact that it's not a prohibited material allows the commission consider metal as a minor or major material as a type 1 design alternative. So you see that listed here as a type 1. However, given the fact that it was 100% metal around the building and no attempt was provided to provide some other material on the street-facing facade or provide the windows to sort of offset that in some fashion, staff was not willing to approve the metal material as a type 1 design alternative, and therefore it's in front of the commission to be considered as they proposed it. Again, staff in looking at this thinks there's some mitigating ways to allow for that type 1 and allow for the not meeting the transparency and blank walls to some level, but still trying to meet the spirit and the intent of those provisions in the ordinance. So staff is recommending, if you look in the staff rationale, we've sort of looked through that. And so we're recommending approval of this site plan with the requested type 2 and type 1 design alternatives, subject to meeting conditions 1 through 3. We want them to make sure that they're complying with all administrative comments that would be very specific to the way the plan is finalized. We want to make sure that they would provide clear story windows on the primary front facade. So if you see this break line here shown on the elevation, we would want to make sure there's clear story windows provided that's higher than that, such that no horizontally measured segment greater than 15 lineal feet above that line would be without a window opening. Then the third condition would be that provision of an approved major material on the primary facade, such as brick, concrete, masonry unit, finished concrete, or stone for the first 5 feet above grade. Wrapping around the east and west facades for no less than 20 feet. And if you look, that's sort of the provision for meeting the intent of the code to have that wrapped around and have that other material on that primary facade, that stronger material towards the base of the building. So that's the staff recommendation. Are there specific questions? I don't believe there's any cards provided here, so the consent map is empty basically.
Questions for Eric? Thank you. Any questions for Eric? Is the applicant here to speak?
I believe John Durner, I saw him on the list, and I think Sugar, Mr. Sugar's on the line as well.
Okay, the applicant?
Actually, I think those two were for the last item. I
believe Troy Hugan is with the applicant. I'll go ahead and unmute him.
Okay.
Troy?
Yes, good evening. And I guess from what I've gathered over the last couple of hours, I get one chance to speak. So I would actually like to let Shive Hattery speak first, if I may. And if Naomi wants to speak, I'd like her to speak as well. And then I'd like a chance to come back at the back end if possible.
Troy, you'll get 10 minutes as your applicant team, and then after that, you would have an opportunity to rebut anybody from the public if we have anybody from the public that speaks. You'll get a couple shots.
Yeah, so I would like Todd or Brent from Shive to go ahead, and if Naomi has anything, and then I can either finish out the 10 minutes or rebut, either one.
Okay. So, Brent?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Name and address, please.
Yep. Thank you. Brent Strauch, STRAUCH. I'm with Shive Hattery.
The address is 4125 Westtown Parkway, Suite 100, West Des Moines 50310. First off, thanks to the commission for your time here in this matter tonight. We certainly appreciate everybody's time, and we'll try to be as brief as we can. We appreciate the planning staff's comments, as well as their assisting kind of helping us through navigating the recent updates to the city code. Our submission was shortly after the December final approval of the code, so that's kind of why we have a couple projects on the front end and then this one on the back end that are phased a little bit differently, but all trying to match the same design. And so what we'd like is, we'd like to have the commission consider the approval of the Type 2 design alternatives as requested in regards to the minimum requirements for transparency and the blank wall limitations on the primary furnished facade. The request comes with special considerations from not only Helena, but as well as the project design professionals throughout the design process to extend the functionality and the aesthetics of the existing Helena campus and its facilities. This includes a couple recently approved buildings adjacent to the proposed that will be built nearly concurrent to this project. We'll have 3 projects, roughly $70+ million concurrently being constructed, and the other 2 previously approved under the old code. As well as we certainly want to meet, and we feel that we have met the general intent of the neighboring properties, as well as the Vandalia corridor. So when Eric was kind of given a high-level picture from looking at the southeast and then to the southwest, the warehouse that came into the picture in the southwest is another, that facility's been there now 6-7 years. We're roughly 100 foot away from it to the east, and the general intent and the design and the materials will match and continue that as part of the campus. So really it will act as somewhat of an extension of that. Another thing to consider here is the required setback per code for this project off of Vandalia is 25 feet. Helena has made some great efforts to put that as far back as possible with the intent to have now a large landscaping corridor. As shown on the screen, there's a large landscaping buffer, and so the frontage of the building will actually be located 225 feet off of Vandalia, and that 225 feet will be basically chock full of an extensive landscaping plan that we've worked kind of back and forth with Eric and his staff, and have come up with a great plan that we think not only will accommodate Helena's campus, really bring kind of an up green to it, but as well as brighten up that Vandalia corridor. Kind of the last thing I think, we'll just, Helena remains a great representation of ambitious and positive businesses in Des Moines, and they continue to make efforts to develop their campus in a beneficial manner to the neighboring properties in the city of Des Moines, and I'll let Naomi speak if she has anything. Otherwise, I can open up to questions.
Well, let's just see if there are questions for you first. So, sure. Any questions for Mr. Strauss from the commission?
Jan, this is Greg Jones. I have a question for him. Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So you basically you don't agree with the staff recommendation for these 2 and 3?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Yep. We feel that the design as proposed, it would be more of a sore thumb kind of stick out if we went to match the new code in this area, given the existing facilities on the campus as well as the adjacent properties. It would kind of create a more unique opportunity. And similarly to Eric's comment, but also to yours, Greg, it was mentioned about not having attempted to meet at all. It is a difficult process to meet kind of, I don't want to say half-heartedly, but in small portions with something like this. The way I see it is this is an all-or-nothing type thing. The 5 foot of facade would be almost an inappropriate look if we went with anything less than 5 foot. And as well as the windows, if we put 1 or 2 windows on a building of this size, it would be almost detrimental to the look and provide no value. So That's why we feel it is an all or nothing kind of, and in order to match the existing campus, we feel it best as the proposed design.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Greg Wautier. Brent, do you have any photos, or does staff have any photos of the other buildings that you're referencing wanting to blend with?
I'm not sure, Eric, if you have the ability to show that.
This might be a good place for me to interject if I can while we're looking for those. I've been the site manager at Helena for almost 18 years. When I got there, we had 20 acres of property. Today, we're just under 100 with 2 subsequent purchases from the city. And we have tried very hard to be good citizens of the Vandalia Road neighborhood. And as Brent mentioned, staying 250 or 225 back from Vandalia. I look at the neighborhood we're in with the junkyards across the street, and also knowing the connector is going to make our neighborhood really kind of an isolated business park in the not terribly distant future. And then I think the other thing that everybody has to understand is we're a toll manufacturer, and I'm not sure everybody understands what that means, but our projects are driven by our customers. We work for all the large agricultural chemical companies of the globe. And as a result, this building was actually ordered in December based on the existing building codes, because no one could tell us for sure when the new codes were coming into place. As Naomi knows, we've been working on these projects basically the whole of 2019. And as Brent said, they sequentially fell into place at slightly different times. But we actually have 5 buildings that are currently or getting ready to be built. This will be the last one to start. And all of those got a good rolling start in 2019. So again, we have no interest in being a bad citizen or a bad neighbor, but by the same token, we want to just make sure that we're treated fairly, and our entire campus is steel structure buildings. And I heard the comment about durability. Our site has been a chemical plant since the early 1950s, and we are still using the original steel buildings at the center of our plant that were built in 1952, 53, and 54. So I understand the durability concern, but by the same token, we have buildings that will hit 100 years shortly after I retire. So we just ask for consideration to know that the entire story of our campus and the process down on Vandalia is much bigger than a code that was started a couple of months ago. Or, put in place a couple of months ago.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the applicant?
Jan, this is Brent. One more time, I apologize, and I'm kind of putting Eric on the spot. I did just send a snippet of that warehouse, looking at that front side. I don't know if that'll be capable or not. I may have maybe put you on the spot a little bit there. I apologize.
So this is Greg Wautier again. I'm looking on Google Earth, and we all know Google Earth doesn't lie, always tells the truth. And what I see are predominantly a blue tinted series of metal buildings. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Is that the same color and tinting that you're planning for this new one?
Yeah, we actually, and I don't know how many of you have been down on the corridor at all. I would hope you have been prior to tonight, but there's a tremendous amount of construction. Our new and I do want to correct one comment. Mr. Lundy made reference that we were adjoining the cold storage. That's not accurate. They are a separate company. We have a 200,000 square foot building that's getting near completion that shares a property line with them. That building is actually tan metal because it's going to be a separate DBA in our organization. And we have a building back on the property that's going up right now that will be white, but it will be behind all of our blue buildings. And so, yes, it would be, I think the correct term is Hawaiian blue. But yes, that's the building color that would be in the building nearest Vandalia at 225 feet setback.
Great, thank you.
And I guess just to finish the story, as recently as 18 years ago, we had about 45 employees on a daily basis. Today, we're running at 125. When these projects finish, we'll be closer to 165, 170. Yeah, there's a photo of the building we built about 5 years ago. Again, 100,000. That's a 100,000 square foot warehouse, 225 feet off Vandalia with appropriate landscaping and rock in the front and manicured lawn. And again, if you had photos of the other side of the street, you would see something significantly different.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the proposal? Okay. I don't see anyone. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of the proposal or express concern? Raise your hand. And again, we're talking about item 10. Item 10. Raise your hand or star 9. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Therefore, it's time to close the public hearing and time for discussion from the commission.
I wanted to offer one thought. This is Greg Wattier. Any of you that have the opportunity to sort of bring up an aerial view, Google Earth or something like it, I would encourage you to do so and just kind of look through campus.
This is Will Page. Another comment, that's looking from the air, but another comment is from looking from the highway because of the great setback. And when you drive, I'm not saying that you drive fast past this place, but of course, you kind of do. But the real impression that one gets from the road is a great linear stretch, okay? And that blends in with, it's a floodplain. So the whole feeling of the building is a very linear feeling, and there's a deep setback. In a certain way, detailing on the building itself, a case could be made that detailing on the building itself really doesn't call attention to the linear feeling of the whole thing. And so in this instance, I'm not quite sure that, items number 2 and item number 3 are necessarily appropriate.
It definitely helps to, see the visuals. Other discussion?
Jan, this is Greg Jones.
Yeah.
I agree with Will. I think with the big setback and how scale of the building, it's just 5 feet at the bottom and windows 15 feet on center really just don't do it justice. Unless you're going to do something bigger and bolder, I'd rather do nothing. So I agree with Will.
Yeah, this is Greg. Greg again. I think it should blend with the campus. Sounds like that's what they're trying to do. I think that makes the most sense.
Okay, other discussion? Does somebody want to offer a motion?
I would move staff recommendation deleting numbers 2 and 3.
Okay, we have a motion. Tyler, roll call.
Jan Freed?
Yes. Approved.
Jack Helms?
Aye.
Lisa Howard?
Yes.
Greg Jones?
Yes.
Dory Browse?
Yes.
Emily Webb?
Yes.
Carolyn Jennison?
Yes.
Rocky Spizzato?
Yeah.
Greg Wattier?
Yes.
And Abby Chungeth?
Yes.
So we have a motion to approve staff recommendation striking 2 and 3. Motion carried 11-0.
Will votes yes too.
Yeah, you moved. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we are on our last item, I believe. Request from Iowa Department of American Legion, represented by John Sterner, for review and approval of a Type 2 design alternative for public site plan in accordance with Chapter 135, Section 135-9.2.4 and 135-9.3.1b for property at 720 Lion Street to allow a surface parking lot to be constructed in a DX2 downtown district where new surface parking is not permitted. Also, to consider Type 1 design alternatives, United administratively do not require existing streetlight poles to be replaced with new black colored poles and fixtures, to allow a trash enclosure with a composite board material and without required pedestrian access for proper landscaping.
Yeah, members of the commission, Jason Van Essen with the planning staff. Hopefully you're seeing the aerial identifying the subject property before you. I'll go ahead and switch to full screen mode so it's easier to see. It's on the corner of Pennsylvania Avenue and Lion Street, highlighted in yellow, I-235 corridor to the north. Photograph of the subject property looking north towards the interstate. Western part of the property, looking back towards the north and east. This is the parking lot so this is from Pennsylvania. So looking at the eastern edge of the site, looking towards the west, you can see the current dumpster that's not enclosed. The enclosure would go in this area, and I'll show some more information when we get into that a little deeper. This is the layout sheet, just kind of showing the general layout of the parking lot, location of the proposed trash enclosure, parking lot with access to Lion Street, grading plan, trash enclosure detail with alternative composite louver material, metal framing, solid steel gates, landscaping plan. Moving into the staff report, just once again, I'll highlight or reference the commission to the standards that we have in Chapter 135 that both tell us the purpose of 135, what we're trying to achieve, and then also how do we go about offering Type 2 design alternatives. Won't go into any more detail. The chair, Jan, as she was reading through the agenda, I'm sure the first part of it caught your attention. In DX2, surface parking is allowed, but it needs to take place within a building. In this case, it's the building type that applies is the downtown general building type, but that requires parking within the building. So in this case, for the reconstruction of their parking lot and the upgrading of their parking lights, or the light fixtures within the parking lot, they do need relief from the commission to be able to do that because of that stipulation for that building type. The other items, I'll go ahead and I think what I'll do to be efficient, I'm just going to go to the staff recommendation section here and then explain it as I read it to you. So as staff, we are recommending approval of the Type 2 design alternative for the parking lot to be reconstructed. This is, they're not redeveloping the site or making any major improvements to the building. We think that makes sense to approve that. We are recommending approval of that. On the request for the type 2 design alternative to allow the street poles and fixtures to be retained that are currently there and not replaced with a black pole and fixture. We're recommending denial of that. It's been a long-standing practice before, going back before the adoption of the new Chapter 135, that the city's goal is to achieve a unified appearance in the downtown, and that being with the black street light and pole fixture being the preferred layout. So at this point, the applicant hasn't provided us with any information as to why the streetlight fixtures there around their site. So as such, we are recommending that they do so. And then on the request to use alternative materials for the trash enclosure to eliminate the pedestrian entrance requirement, trash enclosures, if you look in Chapter 135, and you can see it up here in this section of my staff report, they're required to have a masonry wall. They're required to have steel gates and then a separate entrance for a pedestrian to go in and out so that large doors don't have to be utilized. In addition, they're also required to have landscaping around the three perimeter, the three sides that don't have the main doors. The applicant like to, as I showed with the drawings, do a alternative wall material design using something similar to a Trex board with a horizontal pattern. They would like to not do the pedestrian entrance, and then are proposing not to do the landscaping. And I can go back to the pictures. And as staff, I think we have some support for some of what they're asking. You can see the retaining wall to the north. That obviously will shield the views of the trash enclosure from the north, so we don't believe landscaping is needed there. You have the garage to the west, so we don't believe landscaping is needed on that side. And given the limited scope of the project being more of a parking lot renovation project, we think it's appropriate to use a alternative material, which we have allowed over the years in similar circumstances under the previous design standards of zoning ordinance. The one thing that we disagree with the applicant on the trash enclosure is we do believe that there needs to be the 5-foot landscaping along the eastern edge of it to shield views of it from the street. That would likely require one parking space to have to come out. We noted in the staff report that they're actually, the zoning district that they are classified under has, or Chapter 135, as you reference back to that zoning district, BX2, there is no minimum parking requirement. However, you're not supposed to provide more parking than what would be typically required in other districts. In this case, that number would be 18 for a building, an office building of this size. So to do 21 is exceeding that that cap, that maximum that the Chapter 135 is looking for. So we feel that it's appropriate to eliminate this stall and provide the landscaping, which would still exceed the 18 spaces that the code would suggest they should have. They'd still be exceeding that by 2. So that's, let me go back to the staff recommendation. In summary, that is what our recommendation is on the type, the design alternative relief. And then because it's kind of a jointed process of the commission is granting type 2 design alternative relief, but they're also doing a public hearing citation where we're just saying that it should be approved subject to the property, or excuse me, the site plan, building over, the drawings being updated to reflect the relief granted and any other requirements. You have a response map. You can see that we didn't receive any communication from anybody in the notice area. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jason? Is the applicant here and want to speak? Please name and address.
If anybody's here for this item, please raise your hand or *9 on your phone.
I was thinking there were two people who wanted to speak, but.
Oh, we have, okay, here we have somebody. I'll unmute them and we can see if they're the applicant.
Okay.
Hello, are you the applicant?
Yes, this is Greg Sugar.
Okay.
Yes, I represent Stanley Consultants, the consulting firm for the American Legion. Our address in Des Moines is on Court Street, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but bear with me. Or Court Avenue, Suite 300 in Des Moines. I guess I don't have anything to add on the surface parking lot. It sounds like staff recommendation was correct for my understanding. Regarding, pardon?
I was just going to say, do you agree with the staff recommendation? I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, yes. They're basically recommending that we be allowed to remove and replace in kind the surface parking lot that we were requesting. So we agree with the staff recommendation. Pardon me?
No, go ahead. Is there anything else that you want to share?
I guess with regard to the landscaping requirement, it seems excessive given the fact that we're already going to be putting landscaping on the east side of the property next to the new parking lot, or the new paving, I guess, for the parking lot between there and the sidewalk. So that will be screening the view from Pennsylvania Avenue, as well as the buffer fence that's required along there. With regard to the tracks enclosure, I guess I wasn't quite clear on staff recommendation on the pedestrian access door, whether they were, we had requested relief from a separate pedestrian access door. I wasn't clear on whether they were recommending, but given the fact they're two small gates, 2 3-foot gates, it's easy enough for a pedestrian to open one of those and walk in there and throw the trash away and close it back up. So that's about it. John, I know you're on the line, and maybe you can talk if you have anything else to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the applicant? Okay. Is there anyone who wants to speak in opposition or express concern? Okay. Jason, did you want to answer the applicant's question about how he wasn't clear about two things on the recommendation?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think just to make sure that he's understanding what the staff recommendation is, as staff, we are saying, yes, put in the black street light and pole fixtures. And with regard to the trash enclosure, we are saying that it's okay not to have the pedestrian entrance. We're okay with what you're proposing, other than we want the landscaping on the east edge of the enclosure.
Does the applicant want to respond? Any response?
This is Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I've got my hand raised.
John.
John Durner has his hand raised.
I'll let John talk.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. I had a little trouble getting my hand up there for some reason.
One of the reasons that we are asking relief from the city streetlights is simply because we're a nonprofit. This project is already a significant financial burden on the organization, and we're just really trying to understand the logic of burdening a nonprofit with the replacement of streetlights, especially if they're not for a functional purpose, if it's just for aesthetics. And so that's the main reason. It's merely financial, and because we are a nonprofit organization.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Durner from the commission? Okay, I see a hand up. Would you like to speak again? Is it Mr. Sugar? Or? You want to speak again?
This is Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm fine. No, it wasn't me raising my hand, but I thought I'd respond to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised, so it's time to close the public hearing. Time for discussion.
Hey, Jason, Jack Helmus.
Yes.
How many light poles are you talking about, and how much do they cost to replace with a black pole to your specifications?
And where are they?
Let me go back to the photographs and we can walk through them. Well, I'll go to the site plan. I think off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure there's, excuse me, I have a little technical difficulty. Give me a second. I believe there's one on Lion Street and I think up to 3 on Pennsylvania. I'll if you give me a second while you guys deliberate, I can double check that.
Okay, so other comments, questions, discussion from the commission?
Chair, if I could speak. I believe there's at least 3 poles on Pennsylvania and 1 on Des Moines Street, or I'm sorry, the other street. It looks like, I think our estimate was probably between $30,000 and $50,000 to replace light poles.
That's quite a premium on a parking lot repair.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, this is Greg. Can you refresh my memory on what is it that kicks in having to do a site plan review and update?
When they remove and replace all the parking lot, that is what has triggered the site plan on this. Jack's point about it being, that's all they're doing. They're not building a new building is certainly something for the commission to consider.
So Michael, Jack again, if they were just putting another lift of asphalt in their parking lot, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, right?
There would not be a site plan to replace. It's tearing up the pavement and replacing it that caused the site plan.
Do you know if they're increasing, decreasing, or staying the same on parking lot area?
Jason, can you confirm that on the site plan?
I'm sorry, Greg cut out on my end. Could you repeat your question, Greg?
Do you know if they're increasing, decreasing, or staying the same on parking lot area?
I believe it's staying the same.
And Greg, Jack, yeah, actually it's getting smaller because they're taking a spot away from them to put planting next to the trash enclosure.
Yeah, if you adopted the staff recommendation, there would be a reduction. I've got Google Street View up, and you can see one pole here that's along their property, and then these two for sure, and then possibly, hopefully this is, you guys can see this well. There's a third one up by the interstate that may or may not be along their property.
Could you leave that picture up, the one just before this one, please?
Rotate street view.
Yeah, come back down to the south. Well,
don't worry, I'll get you there. Here we go.
Yeah, this one. I want you to take a look at the building, at the flagpole, and particularly I want to look at the streetscape itself as a whole. I drive this at least once, I don't know, every other day, okay? And you're going up Pennsylvania, and you're going across I-235. I-235 is replete with all of these aluminum-colored metal poles, one thing or another. You can see some of the signal poles, the horizontal poles, and so forth and so on. And you know, to my eye, just in terms of the aesthetics, suddenly to go from all of these black poles up to all of the silver-colored poles along the interstate is kind of a dysfunctional vision. I prefer the consistency, quite frankly, of the street lighting and the use of metal along 235 myself.
Other discussion?
So, Will, this is Abby. I just have a question about what you just said. I tend to agree with you about the lighting on Pennsylvania, but what about the lights or two? I don't know if there's two lights on Lion.
Just one.
Just one.
Right here. Unless you count this one at the corner. Depends on what street you assign that to.
But
That's
Abby,
eliminating
looking on
Pennsylvania.
to the west, it looks like there's silver going on down there, right?
Right, but isn't the presumption is that they will eventually turn over to the black because of the district that they're in?
Yes, as development would occur, we'd be asking, or site plans coming through, we'd be asking for it to change over.
Yeah, they're almost in the interstate right-of-way, Will.
Yes, that's kind of my point.
I think the point I'd like to throw out, this Greg Wattier, for the board to think about is, I actually think the point's a bigger sort of conversation, and I know 3.5, almost 4 hours in, we're probably not interested, but with an existing building under Chapter 135, there's specific triggers that have to do with percentages and things in terms of whether or not an existing building needs to have updates that meet current planning and zoning regs. Parking lots don't seem to have, or sites don't seem to have as descriptive of rules. So in other words, I struggle with, and I understand staff, you're doing the right thing here, you're applying the code, but I struggle with the fact that they're basically taking out and putting back what's there. They're not increasing its size, they're not doing those things. The fact that they even had to go through a site plan process, I struggle with that. So probably just because of that, I'd probably be willing to waive like they'd like. I don't know if that's appropriate. That's kind of where I'm at.
Does someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, it's Jack. I'm punch drunk at this time of night. Move staff with the exception of the black light poles.
Okay, we have a motion. We've had some good discussion. Tyler, roll call, please.
Greg Jones?
Yes.
Jan Freed?
Yes.
Lisa Howard?
Yes.
Dory Browse?
Yes.
Will Page?
Yes.
Carolyn Jennison?
Yes.
Rocky Spizzato?
Yes.
Greg Wattier?
Yes.
Abby Chungeth?
Yes.
Emily Webb?
Yes.
Motion for item 11 moves 11-0.
Thank you. Pat, other item, director's report?
Oh, no.
No, the length of this meeting is a product of canceling or postponing 2 previous ones, so thank you for your patience. A lot of effort went into getting us into the 21st century on going digital or going virtual on these meetings. This will probably be the new norm as far as virtual meetings. Hopefully they will not all be the same length. I would just want to thank everyone for their efforts and their patience. And if you have suggestions on improvements, please email us so we can try and make those for the next meeting. Everybody stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And thanks again to staff because they really did work hard to make this all come together. So, and thanks everybody. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you. I
Thanks,
agree
Jim.
on staff. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.